Education is a right, it is not a privilege.
There are two ways to use strength, one to push down and the other to pull up.
No student with the talent, drive, and desire should be denied the opportunity for a post-secondary education.
The only thing that separates women of color from anyone else is opportunity.
One of the things that concerns me today is that people may think that Pell is an acronym for something else and that it's not the name of an individual.
You know, Claiborne Neal was sort of a bulldog when he got something in his head.
That set up this enormous several-year battle between him, because he was fairly alone in this, and the colleges. They fought it tooth and nail. It was really quite a war.
Senators have personal hideaway offices in the Capitol. So we did end up toward the end clandestinely meeting with Senator Pell and others with the House members plotting to overthrow Mrs. Green and plotting to adopt the Pell Grant.
By any means necessary to protect the access to education and to please fight for the Pell Grant.
And it's helped them more than just giving them just a financial resources, but you help give them dignity.
There was this very special individual who came from a life of tremendous privilege and yet understood that the greatness of this country depended upon the education and character of its people, and that what was done for them would repay this country many, many times over.
Without federal aid, educational opportunity in American higher education just would not exist. We strengthened the federal role in this legislation, and in so doing, we hope to end, once and for all, any question, any reservation, any doubt about our commitment to ensuring access and opportunity to deserving students. We stand by that commitment.
My name is Leland Melvin. I was born in Lynchburg, Virginia, to two school teachers, Deems and Grace Melvin, who inspired me to believe in myself and know that I could do anything I put my mind to. Lately, I've been telling people about this quote that I heard from Mark Twain, and it said, "The two most important days of your life are the day that you were born and the day that you find out why." And I think as we progress through, elementary school, middle school, high school, we're all trying to figure out, what our purpose is and why we're here. But, opportunities like the Pell Grant can help you actualize your why through education and through higher education. And if you keep on that trajectory, you'll then help understand what that why is and help other people, get their why. So it's important that we know what those 2 days are. The first one, it's getting that second one.
Many people know that Senator Pell went to Princeton University. But after he graduated from Princeton, he actually joined the Coast Guard. And at the Coast Guard, he served as a cook. He found himself meeting all sorts of men as a cook who were from all different parts of the United States and from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And he realized that many of them were as smart, if not smarter, than many of his fellow Princetonians. And he started thinking about the fact that it was the money that his family had, the influence that afforded him this world-class education. And he thought that these men deserved it too. What they needed was a helping hand with some funding. And so Senator Pell creates the Pell Grants ultimately, so that men like his fellow cooks on the Coast Guard can fulfill their dreams and get the education that he knew they deserved.
Isn't the real problem, though, with regard to higher education, that of making it available to a lot of youngsters who presently are not getting it because of the lack of financial means? There are 100 youngsters who don't have the opportunity to go to college now because they're neither great football players, they're not gee whiz A1 kids, and they would still yet benefit a great deal by a college education, which they could get if only they had the financial means.
I'm Dave Dooley, the president of the University of Rhode Island. With the Pell Grants, we extended the expectation to Americans that anyone who had the ambition and the drive to go to college and the capabilities to succeed in college would have that opportunity provided for them, or will have the necessary assistance to enable them to do that. It is in the United States long-term and even short-term best interests for the people of America to be able to get an education beyond that afforded the primary and secondary schools.
Everybody benefits. What Senator Pell used to say all the time, that a rising tide lifts all ships. And that is how people now understand having as many talented Americans as possible go to college.
For me, it's as Abraham Lincoln once said, "Upon the subject of education, I can only say that I view it as the most important subject which we as a people can be engaged."
At the time, there was great concern, particularly among private colleges, that they were going broke. And the form of assistance that they wanted was direct grants from the federal government based on their enrollments.
In the old days, the government gave the money to the colleges, and the colleges handed it out. And so they were in charge. They picked and chose who got the money and who didn't. And the student, on the other side of the coin, had to go hat in hand to the college and say, "Please give me some money."
But Pell said, "No, that doesn't go nearly far enough. We gotta get down to the people, you know? We gotta get down to where the rubber meets the road, see?"
He wanted to make certain that everybody had an opportunity, and he was always concerned about educational opportunity for everyone, not just for those that had the means to go on to higher education.
He thought that the government should hand the money to the student, and then the student, comfortable with that pot of money in his or her hands, would then go to the colleges and say, "See, I've got the money. Which of you wants me bad enough?"
This was a different view, different goal. And it wasn't that we were anti-institutions. It's just that we were pro-young people.
When we were in that fight, it was not popular. There were just a small group of us at the beginning. And you really had to stand up and have courage to take that position at that time.
The establishment within higher education and all of their associations were not in favor of the Pell Grant. I mean, they were opposed to it, and they wanted direct federal support for the institutions.
And that set up this enormous several-year battle between him, because he was fairly alone in this, and the colleges. They fought it tooth and nail. It was really quite a war.
This was an acrimonious battle for a while.
I remember that we had particular quarrel with the late Congresswoman Edith Green of Oregon, who was a very intelligent, strong-willed person with whom most of her fellow Democrats often found themselves in disagreement. And Senator Pell and I would work together to overcome her unhappiness about whatever it was we were trying to do.
She chaired the House Subcommittee on Education, he chaired the Senate Subcommittee on Education. So they were sort of opposite numbers, as he would say, and to some degree adversaries.
You know, she was more or less our champion. She was kind of on our side. She was a very strong person. She had her opinions.
They have what's called a conference, where the House people come and the Senate people come, and they try to smooth out the differences between the bills that were passed in the two bodies.
And so the big conflict, or the battlefield on which this all played out, was in the conference committee between the House and the Senate.
Every single House-Senate conference was absolutely closed to the public.
It involved how to figure out how to get the House members to overthrow their chairman, how to get the House members to desert Mrs. Green and go over to Senator Pell's side and give in to the Senate on this basic question of policy.
Well, there were very strong advocates of supporters of Mrs. Green and the direction that she wanted to take.
At that time, pretty much myself, as well as most of my colleagues, we thought, well, hey, what we need is not a change. We don't need more programs. What we need is more money in these programs. So we were primarily there to testify for Mrs. Green, to say that this is our experience and this is what we thought was needed.
I got all the community colleges making calls, and we had, the beauty of the community colleges is that there are a lot of them out there, and I could get a lot of college presidents, even though we were sort of the new gang on the block. We had some horsepower out there politically, and I knew how to use it, and we marshaled hundreds of calls into the Congress, and so pretty soon there were some House members that were not going to go along with Edith Green in the conference committee.
Senators have personal hideaway offices in the Capitol. So we did end up toward the end clandestinely meeting with Senator Pell and others with the House members, plotting to overthrow Mrs. Green and plotting to adopt the Pell Grant. When the decisive vote was cast and Mrs. Green left the conference kind of defeated and crestfallen.
So when the crunch was on, the Senate was absolutely unified behind, their conferees were totally 110% with Senator Pell, and Edith couldn't quite pull her whole gang into line because we'd softened some of those people up. So Pell finally won in the dark of the night.
I guess the most dramatic moment was when, at around 4 or 5 in the morning, Mrs. Green gave up and just stormed out of the room. And I actually felt sorry for her in a way. I mean, I sort of felt it was a long, tough negotiation. And she was clearly defeated. And I almost wanted to follow her out of the room and sort of, she would have not liked it either. I knew that. But, you know, there was a part of me that was rejoicing, and there was another part of me that really felt sorry for her, too.
Now, she was a strong-willed lady, and I give her a lot of respect and so on. She also was the one that has done some great things. She was one of the people that introduced the Title IX legislation, for example, to kind of create equality between male and female sports. And a lot of people forget that. But, you know, at that time, that wasn't the case. So Mrs. Green was a person of principle.
Those were the days when bipartisanship was real. And people marched to the same drummer despite their political background.
But in hindsight now, I'm glad that they were able to compromise, because I think as a result of that agreement, we now have not only the best of both worlds. We have not only the Pell Grant program, but we continue to have the flexibility that institutions can still use to help individual students on the campus with the campus-based programs.
And by his persistence, his doggedness, and his gentlemanliness, no one could get mad at him, he finally prevailed.
You take away a view of integrity, you take away a view of men and women of substance, you take away a significant event that really changed higher education. And that's the bottom line.
I am delighted to report that the House Senate conferees have reached agreement on a higher education bill after some 10 weeks of very tough negotiations. Actually, the agreement finally came about at 5:30 in the morning after an all-night session that started at 2 the previous afternoon. As chairman of the Senate conferees, I am particularly proud of this omnibus higher education bill. It includes my own proposal for direct federal grants to youngsters who wish to continue their education after high school.
My name's Solange Fernandez. I'm the coordinator for the Latino College Access Coalition, which is a program of the College Planning Center of Rhode Island. I'm on my way to Central Falls High School for my weekly visit to meet with students and parents and helping them fill out their FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. That's the main application that every college student needs to fill out in order to receive any type of financial aid from any college or university. Primarily with this form, they will determine if they are eligible for a Pell Grant, which is for many of the students here at Central Falls High School, a vital piece of their financial aid. How are you? ¿Cómo están? Come on, vengan. Your EFC is still 0, which means you do qualify for a full Pell Grant. I'll print this for you and I'll explain it to your mom in Spanish too. Tuition alone at URI is $12,000. If you live on campus, it's another $13,000. So the Pell Grant will cover $56.45, so there's still a big difference there. It's not going to cover it all.
We already have a very strong transfer pipeline that's growing. We have a great partnership with the Community College of Rhode Island, for example, where we encourage students who have significant financial difficulties, whose financial aid needs we may not be able to completely satisfy, to really consider starting at the Community College of Rhode Island, where the cost is much lower, accumulating credits there for a year or two, and then transferring into the University of Rhode Island to complete their degrees. I think that's a good strategy.
How many people receive Pell Grants? This year, over 9 million Americans will receive Pell Grants. 20 years ago, that was 3 million Americans. And the reason for that is twofold. If you think of what's happened to the middle class in this country, it has really disappeared. So more people qualify for the Pell Grants than ever before. You have to be a family of 4 earning probably in the mid-20s in order to get that kind of a level of Pell Grant.
I am a mother of 2. My son right now is 18 and I have a daughter with 24 years old. She's going to college too. And we can say we are a very hard worker family. We like to work hard and we like to improve our lives.
I work in KW Weaving, very close to here. I worked over there for 10 years. I work machine operator. He make weaving for the army. I work 11 hours a day, Monday to Friday.
Because we was very worried about tuition, how we gonna do it. So when I suggested my husband to open an account as a credit card to pay the first payments, he was like, no, how are we gonna pay that? But then we start learning about how these grants work, and they explain us, you don't need to pay back, you can take your kids to college, and it's a great opportunity. It's like we never imagined something like that.
I want to graduate from high school and move on to college, and I want to study criminal justice and hopefully become a lawyer. I'm stuck between 2 schools right now to see which one I can obviously go and make it better for my family and myself. I've gotten the Pell Grant, I've gotten presidential academic scholarships, I've gotten different scholarships and a few loans from different schools. Right now, I'm part of a CF Youth Works, where they pay me every 2 weeks to do a job, and right now I'm actually at a law office in Cranston. So I work under a lawyer, and I just do filing and voicemail, and just anything he asks me to do. This community helped me and molded me into who I am today, so obviously it would be great to give back.
So this tells you something about the backgrounds of some of the families that are going to college, and it's wonderful because if you go to college, the chances are that you are permanently and your children are permanently out of poverty.
We all are aware of the financial situation in the family, and we all know that we're gonna have to get some sort of financial aid and earn some sort of financial aid to be able to get a college education. You wanna go to this caliber school, you're gonna have to work hard for it and get that scholarship money so you can go.
Harvard, it's been a dream. A kid from Central Falls whose parents didn't even graduate high school has the chance to come here, and that was just mind-blowing for me. Central Falls is very predominantly Hispanic, and it's diverse, but I think that Cambridge and Harvard have, I guess, a different kind of diversity. The climate here really motivates you to become something greater than what you were when you first walked into the gates of Harvard Yard. The Pell Grant is very useful because even though it's only a tenth of my scholarship, that's a pretty big tenth. Like $5,000 is no joke. That's like a sixth of what my parents make in a year. So that would be a very big financial strain for my parents. And if that $5,000, even though it's only a tenth of my scholarship, if it were just gone tomorrow, I couldn't afford to come here, period. So I think that the Pell Grant was very useful in that regard. I'm Jean-Paul Valencia. I'm from Central Falls, Rhode Island. I'm getting a Pell Grant, and I'm going to Harvard. Harvard.
I think the biggest thing that inspires me is when I see that child, that smile and that engagement and that activation of their brain to when they're just doing what they love, and then it's leading them to do great things. And so inspiring the next generation of explorers and seeing that inspiration in them after I've had an opportunity to share with them is something that really, gets me going and helps me think of a better future for all of us through the education of children. And I think one of the things that really disappoints me is when I see hopelessness in children and the apathy, of their existence in this hopeless environment, whatever environment they're in, and or when an educator, whether it's a formal educator or someone, a parent or anyone, because everyone's an educator, is when they don't give that hope to that child and allow them to grow like a flower, needing all the nurturing and the water and the soil and the nutrients to grow into a beautiful individual. And that's what's really disturbing for me, is when that hopelessness, it festers in the community, and it's like a cancer. And so we have to eradicate that through opportunity, through education, and through inspiration.
Well, I grew up in Central Falls, Rhode Island. We were the only black family in 1965, early 70s, and growing up in abject poverty as the only black family, no plumbing, no phone, a lot of times no hot water and no food.
And the Emmy goes to Viola Davis, How to Get Away with Murder.
This is the first Emmy win and nomination for Viola Davis, who is a graduate of Juilliard.
I see a line, and over that line I see green fields and lovely flowers and beautiful white women with their arms stretched out to me over that line, but I can't seem to get there no how. I can't seem to get over that line. That was Harriet Tubman in the 1800s. And let me tell you something. The only thing that separates women of color from anyone else is opportunity. opportunity.
Education is a right, it is not a privilege.
An education isn't a right. Medical care is not a right. Education, these are things that you have to earn.
Different societies have answered that question of right versus privilege in different ways. I think if you look at Europe, most European democracies have adopted the view that higher education in particular is a right. In the United States, we've sort of walked the middle line. I think we were the first nation in the world, through the Land Grant Act of 1862, to set out to educate the average citizen, as opposed to the moneyed class, the business class, the merchant class, the higher echelons of society. And with the Pell Grants, we extended the expectation to Americans that anyone who had the ambition and the drive to go to college and the capabilities to succeed in college would have that opportunity provided for them, or will have the necessary assistance to enable them to do that.
Now we're in a budget crunch. The take-up rate on the Pell Grant program has skyrocketed. The costs have gone up significantly.
We have a federal investment in this, both in the Pell Grant programs, but also the subsidized student loans. This is federal money.
We're reaching this tipping point in this country where we'll have more takers than makers.
Higher education is the future.
They told me that I could not get the scholarship because I hadn't applied for any loans. And the reason I haven't applied for any loans is because I don't want to graduate college in debt.
Congress can't come to an agreement over college loans, and it will end up costing millions of students much more. Interest rates for subsidized student loans has now doubled.
100,000 people have signed petitions urging Congress to refinance student loans. Dozens of organizations have endorsed the bill, including student groups, colleges, and mortgage bankers.
Student debt in the US is now bigger than debt from credit cards and auto loans, and is second only to mortgages. Essentially, student debt is like HPV. If you go to college, you're almost certainly going to get it. And if you do, it will follow you for the rest of your life.
It is the most collectible kind of debt there is. It is non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. They will garnish your wages. They will intercept your tax refunds. They will sue you in court.
College is not a right, it's a privilege. And people used to understand that.
Under the new College Compact, no student should have to borrow to pay tuition at a public college or university.
The evidence is that every time we increase the amount of student aid that's available in both Pell Grants and in loan programs, that's just eaten up by a higher tuition rate.
Every American who could not afford college because of income should be eligible for a Pell Grant that would allow that student to go on and get an education.
Substantial cutback on Pell Grants at a time when college today is unaffordable for the middle class.
Tuition rates have increased roughly 3 times that of inflation over the last 3 decades.
More students have to take out loans or forego college.
My generation is graduating with student debt levels at an unprecedented level.
So you have to be dirt poor in order to get this Pell Grant.
House Republicans still haven't provided details of their plans for the program, but their existing proposals indicate they would cut the Pell Grant funding in half.
Senator Pell's vision was that no student with the talent, drive, and desire should be denied the opportunity for a post-secondary education solely because of a lack of financial resources.
I think if Senator Pell were here, he would say some of the brightest students who are poor are not getting into college.
There is no authority in the Constitution for the federal government to be dealing with education. We should get rid of the loan programs, we should get rid of the Department of Education, and they give us this mess that we're in.
What I would like to see us is seriously look at making the Pell Grants cover a larger cost, a larger percentage of the cost of education. I think we need to reverse that decline to a degree. Maybe not all the way back to where it was when the Pell Grants were initiated, but we need to enable, debt-free, repayment-free grants and aid to students a larger portion of the toolkit that they can use to pay for a higher education. I think that's essential. I think we need to look very carefully at Pell eligibility. In other words, what incomes and what disadvantages that, in addition to income, need to be reflective in the criteria for Pell Grants. We need to have a close look at that and make sure that we've structured the program in a way that really fits our current generations and future generations of students. And the third thing I think we need to do is we need to simply, for all students, sort of ask the question, if we provided a higher level sort of funding and operational stability to our public colleges and universities, that would benefit everybody who goes to college and university, and would leave more money in the pockets of every citizen who pursues higher education. And that's a desirable thing.
The American Student Association of Community Colleges, a network of student governments among the community colleges of the country. No group on the planet has worked longer or harder in the last 30 years in support of the Pell Grant and the funding for it than this organization of student leaders. We're there every year, we're pitching it every year. It's always one of our 2 or 3 top priorities of messages we're taking to Congress. And we're not big, but we are significant. The country badly needs a stronger student voice. The students really are the dynamo of the colleges.
All right, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I started going to school in the spring of 2008 after I had suffered a brain aneurysm. So all of a sudden, here was my life. All of a sudden, I'm in a hospital bed, wake up out of a coma 2.5 months later. My whole life got turned upside down. At that point, it was 2008 that I saw my sister going to school, and I said, you know what, I want to go to school. But coming from a low-income area and low-income family with no money, no resources, I still started going to school. And after I started going to school, all of a sudden I started realizing that Pell Grants were available to help me fund my education. I started realizing, hey, this is what I need to do with my life. So I got involved with my school. I became the ASB president, and that's what I've been working on. Pell Grant is the only reason why I'm able to go to school, and the only thing that has got me to where I am today. And I'm going to continue my progress. I'm going to transfer to Cal State San Bernardino this coming fall, and I definitely need the Pell Grant.
When you are in an area as San Bernardino, California, it is an area that is not lucrative. It's not high-paying jobs. There's not people that have, expensive properties. That's not what it is. And people that are going to school are going on their own motivation. They're not being taught to even go to school. Education is sometimes not even spoken of in our homes as far as furthering your education. So it's really a danger to try to minimize the Pell Grant, not try to even give as much, because so many people need it. But what we're asking today is that you go back to Senator Boxer and ask her by any means necessary to protect the access to education and to please fight for the Pell Grant for San Bernardino Community College District.
I ended up a single parent, homeless with my 2-year-old daughter, and I finally was able to find basically a man's job. I said I was just hard labor, anything. I'll take anything you give me. And so I pulled 50-gallon barrels of recycling every day for 2 years while my daughter went to school at the community college's Child Development Center. I ended up in community college, and it was God's path for me.
Well, first of all, my home life was really crazy growing up. My parents got divorced when I was 3. Neither one of my parents graduated college or anything like that. To be honest, my dad was a drug dealer and my mom was a drug addict. So home life was really crazy. I kind of was following in their footsteps for a while. Had a lot of problems with being incarcerated, getting in trouble, locked up, and stuff like that. And someone told me, I had a lot of people that always believed in me, believed I had a lot of intelligence and talents and things like that. And then someone really pushed me to strive for education. Like right now I have a 3.8 GPA. I'm a president of the Missouri Community College Association Student Government. I'm in Phi Theta Kappa. I'm very involved in my community, things like that. I've done a complete 180, and I believe it's all because I was given an opportunity that I never had before. I didn't have an opportunity to change my life. I was kind of stuck in that same pattern that other people in my family were in. I was getting locked up and things like that, and I saw myself going down that same road, but then opportunity presented itself with the Pell Grant. I was able to go to school. I was able to educate myself and kind of polish my personality and do a complete 180. And now I'm heading in a positive direction, and it's all because I've had opportunity, and that opportunity was the Pell Grant. So.
I was raised by a single mother. I'm an only child. First generation college student. I really didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know what to expect when I started. The community college has been so great. I've done so much since I've been there. I'm our president of our student government. I'm also our chair for our state board for Colorado.
My family is Japanese, so we've lived in the Valley ever since before the internment in World War II. And since then, you know, my family's been serving our country, whether through the police force or through the military, or sometimes both in my father's case. But not a lot of people really have had the opportunity to go to college or university or anything like that. So it's a little bit difficult for me as a first generation college student. And the community college, in my opinion, has really given me the opportunity to go to school at a much lower rate. I wouldn't be able to go to attend a university.
I think if my grandfather were here, I just want to say thank you to each of you for taking the time. You all have so much going on, to fly across the country to Washington to meet with members of Congress. Grandpa would be so proud.
We understand, and I think rightfully so again, that the world is a far more complicated, interconnected place than it was in the 1940s. Information travels in seconds, not months. That's a big difference. The competition is now global, not regional or local. And I think students and families feel accurately that to be competitive in this kind of global marketplace, in this kind of global economy, to be the kind of citizen you need to be in a global society as well as the society in which you're based, just simply requires more knowledge, more expertise, more tools, more skills than it has at any time in our past.
Well, I grew up in poverty. My father and mother got married very young. They divorced early, so I ended up living most of my life in a single-parent household, and it was hard. I am the oldest of 7 children. I lost my mom at a very early age. She died at the age of 42, and I was only 22 years old. I was a sophomore at Cuyahoga Community College, and but for the Pell Grant and other financial opportunities, I would not be where I am today. I believe in what Booker T. Washington said. There are 2 ways to use strength. One to push down and the other to pull up. And because of visionaries like Senator Pell, he used his authority and his position to pull up. And countless students like myself and students generations after me have the opportunity to be able to go to college because of that. I didn't have any money. I didn't know how I was going to get through college. And when my mother died, I didn't think I was going to be able to go on in terms of finishing my college education. But I will tell you, when I walked across the stage of Cuyahoga Community College, I took that degree in my mother's name. When I was blessed enough to matriculate to Cleveland State University, earning both my bachelor's and my master's degree, I took those degrees in my mother's name. So for anybody that doubts that leadership matters, that the seed that Senator Pell planted doesn't matter, I am a living embodiment that it matters, because without that Pell Grant, I would not have an associate's degree. Without that Pell Grant, I wouldn't have a bachelor's degree. And because of the fact that I was able to get a college education, it changed my son's life. A lot of data says that if the parent is educated, it increases the likelihood that their children will be educated. Well, I can bear witness today that my son started college in the 10th grade. He will be graduating from Cleveland State University, and he is a cadet in the Ohio National Guard. So if anybody asks the question about whether or not an investment in young people matters, whether or not investment in us makes a difference, and whether or not the Pell Grant has had the power to change lives after 40 years, I unequivocally say yes, a resounding yes. The Pell Grant made an absolute difference in my life also in the lives of my family.
Claiborne Pell was in his wheelchair, and he'd been lifted out of the car and put in the wheelchair and brought over to the event. And Senator Salazar of Colorado was here at the event. I was still just a candidate for the Senate then. And Ken was there. I knew Ken because we'd been attorneys general together. And so I said, you know, you really ought to meet Senator Pell. He said, you have no idea how much I want to meet Senator Pell. And I took him over and he introduced himself. And it was his chance to say thank you, because he grew up in Colorado in a family that only in his parents' generation got electricity and running water. And for the first time, he and his siblings were able to go to college. He became United States Senator. His brother became a United States Congressman. And it was very moving. I get goosebumps thinking about it now, to think that here's this boy far off on a farm where nobody ever heard of, where running water and electricity were novelties, and he made his way to the United States Senate, and one of the key gateways that got him there was the Pell Grant.
The Pell Grant Legacy Award, the inaugural award, is going to this young woman named Rochelle Gregory, who grew up in a trailer park, who grew up very, very poor, would have fallen through the cracks, and she has a profound testament that if it wasn't for that kind of funding supporter, she's a genius. Not because she's, you know, someone who went to Harvard or someplace like that, because she's making a contribution to so many people as she teaches still in Texas.
What the Pell Grant does for students is that it enables them to have a confidence in their abilities, that there is a program out there that believes in their education as much as they do. I got pregnant at 18, I had another child at 20, and now I have a PhD at 32.
So thank you, Mrs. Pell, thank you, the Pell family. You've changed my life. Your husband, your grandfather, your father changed my life, and it's in turn changed the life of my children and the millions of students across the country, and it's helped them more than just giving them just financial resources, but you helped give them dignity that so often is lacking in their lives. You gave them dignity, so thank you very much.
I think it's very important that people in America understand that behind the Pell Grant there was an individual. One of the things that concerns me today is that people may think that Pell is an acronym for something else, and that it's not the name of an individual. And I think that it's important for them to understand that there was this very special individual who had this in his mind, who came from a life of tremendous privilege and yet understood that the greatness of this country depended upon the education and character of its people, and that what was done for them would repay this country many, many times over.
You know, Claiborne, he was sort of a bulldog when he got something in his head about getting done, and he was bound and determined to see that everybody who wanted one could get an education. And that's what really started his sense of trying to get the Pell Grants passed.
Moxie, Senator Pell was, loved that word. We put it in speeches quite frequently, even though we'd have to tell him that not everybody knew what it meant. But it really is drive, determination, and persistence. And it's something that Senator Pell himself had. Some people will say, how did this sort of quirky senator from Rhode Island get so much done in his life, not only in this area but in other areas? And he was very persistent when he wanted something, and he was very patient. He would wait years to get a policy that he might see as important done, and to build coalitions. And he had a lot of ways of doing that, but underneath it all, he had a lot of moxie.
So the senator called me, and I got on the phone, and he said to me, did you happen to see the Washington Post today? And I said, yes, Senator, I did. And there happened to be an article that day in the Post, and I can't remember the author or the writer now, but somebody had done an evaluation writing about who was the most effective senators and who was not. And in this particular article, they had said that one of the least effective senators was Senator Pell. And he had got word of this, had seen this, and was very distraught and very disappointed. And he called me and he said, "You're a friend of mine." He said, "I trust you." He said, "What is your evaluation of this?" And I said, "Senator," I said, "I couldn't disagree more with this article." I said, "I think you have been very effective as a senator." I said, "You've been one of our very best friends." And I said, "My members of my association also recognize the accomplishments that you've done." And I said, "You know, I'm sorry that somebody's done this, but I said, that's their point of view, but it's not mine."
And Senator Eagleton from Missouri, who was a very close friend of Pell's, and really thought that this piece of legislation was really, truly a momentous moment in American educational policy. So he thought it should be named after Senator Pell. And so he got the amendment together to rename it. It used to be called Basic Educational Opportunity Grants, BEOGs, which, I mean, even if you use the acronym, it was ugly and unattractive. And so Eagleton was all poised to do this, but the staff decided they were not going to tell Pell, because if he did, he would immediately go to Eagleton and say, "I don't want this, it's not right, there should be no personal credit involved here." And so Eagleton sprung it in the middle of a markup, and it was passed quickly and unanimously.
And I think sometimes the greatest problem in public service is you cannot see tangibly the kind of impact that you have upon the lives of individuals or families. And in Pell Grants, you can see that every single day.
Well, I remember as a child, I'd go on runs with Grandpa, and we'd run up the street, and Grandpa would, I mean, he was getting older then, but people would come up and they'd say, Senator Pell, thank you for sending me to college." And Grandpa would invariably stop and shake their hands, and he was so privileged and so touched to meet them. The legacy was that of making a difference in people's lives and making a connection, a human connection with them, and doing it in a very polite and quiet way. And then he would continue on his jog and keep on going. And you know, on those runs, he would, I would say, you know, Grandpa, maybe I'm not a very good speaker, but I'm very interested in government and maybe going to the military. And he would say, "Don't worry, practice, practice, practice. It doesn't matter whether you're the loudest voice. What matters is that the soft voices speak up on behalf of those who have no voice at all."
He was the right kind of aristocrat, a champion by choice, not circumstance, of the common good, our common future, and our common dreams. In a long life of grace, generous spirit, kind heart, and determination, right to the very end. That life is his last true Pell Grant.